no itwe twari kuona no ithwaya twahete ibonde andu othe nginya nguru tukiohwo tugithamio na no ithwaya twambane ibonde andu othe nginya ngati twatwitwo rukungu ni nyakeru gikuyu ngai akiuria mbura tukihanda andu aitu mutikorwo ni hinya kindu kioma ni uthingu wa mwiri na wendo wa ngai urumenyambo hinya witu umago kuri ngai aria tongoretie matingiura gikuyu nitwe twari kuona no ithwaya
Kimathi sent directives to frontline commanders and coordinated all military activities in both Nyandarua and Kirinyaga war fronts. Camp rules were sent to all top camp commanders so that they could enforce them. More meetings were held in Nyandarua in order to draw out war strategies on how to simultaneously fight the colonialists with another subversive group sponsored by the colonialists called the Music Society. The Music Society came around in early 1953. It had been sponsored by the colonialists in an attempt to create confusion in the Mau Mau movement. The group administered oaths to its members and played music during its meetings. Its major objective was to penetrate the Mau Mau intelligence machinery and expose the movement's secrets to the colonialists. Luckily, due to Kimathi's foresight, the colonialists did not succeed. This was because all the society's leaders were arrested and tried in the People's Supreme Court and found guilty of the crimes that they had committed and were summarily executed. Between August and November, Kimathi drafted the Kenya Land and Freedom Army Charter, which composed of about 80 articles. The charter was an attempt to elucidate the revolutionary political and military stand of the Mau Mau movement. These articles were addressed to top political leaders in Kenya, Africa, to British authority in London and other nations abroad. Great battles took place between 1953 and early 1954 when the Mau Mau and the British were at their strongest. But the death of General Matinjago in December 1953 and the capture of General China on 15th of January 1954, the death of General Kago in April 1954, and the increasing friction of Kimathi and Madenge over leadership wrangles began to take a toll on the revolutionary movement. On February 5th, 1954, and after the capture of General China, Kimathi set up a conference which was held at Karathi in Nyandarua. This was necessary in order to develop new war strategies. It was when debating with the militant leaders and patriots that the idea of separating military and administrative affairs was hatched. Members of the KDC Executive Council, in agreement with the Kenya War Council, proposed formation of a legislative body where members of all nations in Kenya could be represented. The result of this suggestion was the formation of the Kenyan Parliament, with Field Marshal Dedan Kimathi as the proposed head of the new government and the Prime Minister. This automatically altered its status and role within the movement. His previous role as the Commander-in-Chief of all the Kenyan Land and Freedom Armies was left to his deputy, General Macharia Wakimemia, who was now elected as the new overall military leader of the armies. The information given to the British by General China under torture proved to be very valuable to the foe and disastrous to the Mau Mau movement. It is from this information that the British devise a systematic way of weakening the movement. In April 24, 1954, the British launched a military campaign in Nairobi and other parts of the country nicknamed Operation Anvil. All urban centres and villages in the central region, including Embu, Rift Valley and Meru, were swept. Thousands of innocent children, women and men were arrested and herded into death camps without any due legal process, where they were later savagely tortured. Many innocent civilians died in the camps. The rest of the remaining population were herded in masses in fortified concentration villages. This was a futile but calculated move by the British to thwart the wave of nationalism sweeping over the country. It is against this background of constant harassment and mass detention of Nairobi militants such as the Kenya War Council Chairman Eliud Mutonyi, the General Secretary Isaac Maina Gathanju, General Enoch Mwangi, Gishohi wa Githua, that the Mau Mau headquarters was moved from the Mathare Valley to Nyandarua Forest, where it was merged with the Kenyan Parliament under the leadership of Kimathi. Therefore, Kimathi automatically became the undisputed overall leader of the national liberation struggle. Though the Land and Freedom Army had made a lot of progress in the weakening of the colonial regime, the matters were not all right in the forest as Kimathi and Mathenge's distrust and suspicion deepened. On the 18th of January 1955, the Governor-General of Kenya, Sir Evelyn Baring, offered an amnesty to Mau Mau activists. The offer was that they would not face prosecution for previous offences but may still be detained. Kimathi rejected this offer. Mathenge and his opportunistic and naive splittist group calling itself the Kenyan League, however, decided to contradict Kimathi by agreeing to negotiate secretly for a peace deal with the British. When Kimathi came to know of this later, he ordered the arrest of the 24 top leaders of Mathenge's camp. Unfortunately, they escaped from the cell before the People's Supreme Court had time to pass judgment on them. The perverse act by General Mathenge regrettably brought to the fore the hidden contradictions between the two leaders. This leadership wrangle is what split the Mau Mau army right in the middle and consequently weakened its resistance against the British. As if things were not desperate enough, Kimathi suffered another blow when his deputy, Field Marshal Macharia wa Kimemia, was killed early November 1955 and his brother, Captain Wambararia, captured in early 1956. He had already lost his brother Wagura back in 1954 in the Battle of Mathare. By early 1956, both the Land and Freedom Army and the British Army were war-torn, the British having failed militarily to exterminate Mau Mau as had earlier imagined. From as early as 1953, they had begun to change tactics and reluctantly had begun to conduct minor constitutional reforms such as the Oliver Littleton Constitution of March 4, 1954, then the Swinnerton Agricultural Scheme in late 1954, but as the war dragged on, they began making desperate and hasty constitutional changes. They encouraged formation of district-level political parties all over Kenya except in Central Province in 1955 and especially with the rise of Kiama Kia Mwenge, the Council of the People. In June 1956, a program of land reform increased the land holdings in the country, and this was coupled with the relaxation of the ban on Africans growing coffee, a primary cash crop. In the cities, the colonial authorities decided to dispel tensions by raising urban wages, thereby strengthening the hand of moderate union organizations like the KFRTU. By late 1956, the British had granted direct election of African members to the Legislative Assembly, followed shortly thereafter by an increase in the number of African seats to 14. On the dawn of 20th of October 1956, Field Marshal Dedan Kimathi Washuri was shot and captured by two home guards, namely Ndirangu Mau and Jogingatia, at the edge of the Nyandarua forest near Njogoine. He was then tied up and taken to Kahigaine Home Guard Post before being taken to Ihururu Chief's Camp and later to the Nyeri General Hospital for the treatment of the bullet wound. Kimathi was later taken to a British kangaroo court where a stage-managed trial was performed. He was charged with the crime of possessing a firearm and sentenced to death by a senior colonial agent named O'Connor on November 26, 1956. Kimathi later appealed his case before the Court of Appeal for East Africa on December 27, 1956, where it was summarily dismissed. He went further to forward a petition to the British Privy Council but never succeeded. Kimathi was savagely murdered on Sunday of February 18, 1957 by the British and his body buried in Committee Prison. Today, his body still lies buried in an unknown location in Committee. This remains so because of lack of political goodwill by the government of the day. After the capture of Kimathi in October 1956 and his gallant refusal to surrender to the British, the overall leadership of the Land and Freedom Army passed down to Field Marshals Musa Mariama and Bainunge. The headquarters consequently shifted from Nyandarua to the Mount Kenya front. The overall command of armies on the Nyandarua war front was left to General Muthoni. The three leaders, assisted by General Chui, waged war against the British till the colonialist was finally expelled from Kenya in 1963 and Kenya regained its independence after more than 70 years of slavery and oppression. Kimathi and Mau Mau are today celebrated as national heroes who fought for Kenya's independence and destroyed the British colonialism in Africa. Millions of Kenyans celebrate Kimathi's Day on February 18th of every year. Though it has not been made a national holiday by successive regimes, many streets in Kenya are named after him. The best known is Kimathi Street in Nairobi, where a statue of him is also erected. The Dedan Kimathi University in Nyeri is also named after him. The hero's name and fame will last forever in the world history.
Omondo adhie kwa omoshe Nambona dhina motikorie Na dhudhano inywe mogakena Inge orenge inywanake Neto kwenda Mere igi egotigana Nongoro itwalane hamwe Okamorata twaranerie Turi na kieha nyondo wa ciana Borori Nduma Ongiorio Atea Nawe Atea Kana ure Mogekoyo Ndoya mokomere na igoro Njugeni ende Mogekoyo Ninge orenge Nake Motungata Gere Boroli Namona Dena Motikorie Nadudano Inywe Mogakena Kiuokia Moisho Na Inywanake Omondo